The Cinema Specials, Phil and John are back, and it's been a little bit now, 10, 11, 12 days, something like that. We were in such a routine of just every Monday or or Tuesday. We weren't missing by much. And now to come out here and hit us with a Thursday, I'm sitting here going, what in the heck is going on? I was on vacation last week. We're coming out. We're talking Rocketman, and I'm not there. And the reason we're doing this is because Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse movie, came out this past weekend, although you probably didn't know it because the movie made nothing. It actually didn't do bad internationally, probably because of I don't know, UK influence and stuff on that. But in the US, it made $3 million. And that is an absolute disaster. Yeah, that is so bad. I mean, if you really think about it, the Bob Marley One Love movie made 96 million.
Wow.
And then worldwide, it made, I think, 187 or 190 million or something like that. But this movie did nothing. And so here we are talking about Rocketman, and I'm not there. Two random movies looking at Elton John and Bob Dylan. And you know what? I don't know how many people are going to watch this. I don't really care how many people are going to watch this because we're also at the point of we banked on a movie doing a little bit better than it did when we decided that these were the two movies that we were going to do. But I'm excited to talk about Rocketman, and I'm not there. And the creativity you can still get from some of these musician biopics. I think these musician-based biopics have really fallen into a laziness element that these two movies did not have, and everything's trying to climb off of the success of Bohemian Rhapsody at this point, not realizing that Bohemian Rhapsody was a one-off and is actually an absolutely horrible movie. But John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Phil. Glad to be here. I'm really excited to talk about these movies because they are different when it comes to music biopics. Like you said, I think a lot of our biopics are very paint by numbers now, even just looking at the ones in recent years. I mean, I haven't seen Back to Black yet. From what I'm hearing, probably not going to watch it in all honesty because it's not getting good reviews at all. But even if we extend this back to this Bob Marley movie that I said I wouldn't see because I saw way too many commercials for it, but did pick up, some box office success there. Elvis last year was pretty popular. That was still last year, right? I'm not time slipping here. That was 2 years ago, wasn't it? It was 2 years ago because it was
2022.
Yeah. But like you said, Bohemian Rhapsody is kind of this one that made it so that we got this influx of all of these musician biopics when we didn't have a lot of them prior to that, except for I'm Not There, which I actually kind of vehemently remember being released in theaters and all the talk around this movie when it was released.
It was a movie that didn't do well. It was a different kind of movie. It was a hard movie to sell because it wasn't just I remember when this came out, I was in high school, and I remember Cate Blanchett got nominated for the Oscar for playing essentially Bob Dylan, even though it's all different versions of Bob Dylan. She gets nominated for the Oscar for playing Bob Dylan. I remember people being like, what the hell is this? And the thing was, it was so artsy that I do think it kind of turned some people away before they even gave it a chance. This is a movie, first time I saw it. I'm a big 2007 movie fan. I love movies from the 2000s. I think it's one of the best decades ever. And it was also when I was growing up. So it's an easy one for me to latch onto. But I never got around to this one. And I'm so happy we did this podcast because I really, really, really enjoyed what Todd Haynes did with this movie. But you're right. It was one of those random one-offs. And I guess you had Ray in 2004, which was successful, and that got nominated for Best Picture. You had 8 Mile in 2002, which was pretty good. You had a couple in the 90s. But it really seems like I'm Not There was trying to do something else. It wasn't just trying to be a biopic. And I think that's what I really appreciated about it. And then, to go into Rocketman just briefly here, what I really appreciate about Rocketman, even though I definitely enjoyed it less on my second viewing than I did on my first, what I really appreciate about Rocketman is that it did try to have fun with it. And we had seen Bohemian Rhapsody not have any fun. We had Straight Outta Compton come out before that, also a massive, massive success, huge hit. And the thing with Straight Outta Compton was it's not really a musical. Straight Outta Compton was definitely more of a drama about these people. It was kind of more like Amadeus, right? And so you get Bohemian Rhapsody, which was remember Queen's music? Here's a bunch of greatest hits. You're pretty much watching a greatest hits. Rocketman at least tried to be different from that. And it always makes me laugh that out of all of the people, Austin Butler and Rami Malek, who probably the worst Oscar-winning performance in the history of Best Actor, like no joke. Taron Egerton's the one who doesn't get the nomination, and he is by far the best out of those three, in my opinion. Unless you're about to disagree, but that's how I feel.
I actually haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody.
Good.
Yeah, I know. I felt like that might be your opinion on that situation, but I never saw it. It came out in my 3 years in exile, so
I have
so
I have seen 60. I'm looking at my ranking right now. I've seen 68 of the Best Actor winners performances, and I have Rami Malek ranked 67th out of 68. And really, the main reason for that is because in old Arizona, Warner Baxter is whatever. That's all I'm going to say about that. You can go watch that movie for yourself. It's free on YouTube. You don't have to pay for it. You can go watch it for yourself and determine what you think of Warner Baxter as the Cisco Kid in that movie. But it's just not good. And it's crazy that Taron Egerton got no credit for this movie, and this movie wins the Oscar for I'm Gonna Love Me Again or something like that. But it is funny how it kind of got tossed to the wayside, even though this was still during a popular time, and it was 1 year after Bohemian Rhapsody.
It's 2019, right? I'm not making this up.
Yep.
That was kind of a loaded year for the Oscars, so I'm not terribly surprised he didn't get the nomination.
I think what surprised me is after what happened. So, and I feel like you have to talk about it in this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation might go a little sideways, a little backwards. It might not be full reviews of Rocketman, and I'm not there. I kind of like talking about the history of biopics in general. I think it's kind of a fun discussion. So if you're just tuning in, that's pretty much what we're doing right now. We're going to be talking a little bit about musical biopics. And if you're here, like the video, please appreciate that. But the thing is, coming off of the 2019 Oscars, which is the 2018 movies, right? Rami Malek wins for Bohemian Rhapsody. That was also the year A Star Is Born came out. And so you did have for Best Picture in that year, and I just want to make sure I get them all. It was Green Book, which obviously, people are down on, even though I don't think it's that bad of a movie. That's the one people are down on. You had Black Panther, so people were really excited you were getting Black Panther nominated. Bohemian Rhapsody gets nominated. A Star Is Born gets nominated. These are pretty big movies from that year. You also had Black Klansman, which did pretty all right. The Favorite, which is great. Roma, and Vice. So those were your Best Picture nominees. What surprises me about Rocketman getting nothing the following year, even with how good of a year that following year was, is that the Oscars were very happy with the fact that they could start off their ceremony with Queen playing We Will Rock You or whatever the hell they played. Yeah. And they were very excited about all of that. And this was at a time where they were really pushing, let's try to make the Oscars popular again. Let's get the TV ratings. Let's not just be a celebration of film. Let's put in really bad movies that also did really great at the box office. And so for the next year, you don't Joker is the closest thing you get to that movie. And I know that movie made a boatload of money, but you have Parasite, Ford vs. Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It does surprise me that when you list off those movies, that a movie like Rocketman, coming off of how popular Bohemian Rhapsody was, even though people were celebrating and excited for a Bryan Singer movie with all of the crap going on with Bryan Singer at that time, to get the nomination, and they were rooting for it to win. And Rami Malek is, I don't even know what that performance is. It's so bad. He wears fake teeth the whole movie. That's it. I'm kind of surprised Rocketman got nothing, and Taron Egerton is very good, and I feel like the direction and everything is really solid in the movie for the most part. It's definitely uneven, but I feel like all music biopics are going to be uneven, and I'll get into that when we really start diving into the different characters portraying Bob Dylan in I'm Not There.
Yeah, I think one of the most impressive things about Rocketman to me is just how much Taron Egerton looks like Elton John the entire movie.
It's insane. Yeah.
And if you look at Taron Egerton, that man looks nothing like Elton John. So just the costuming and makeup in that movie is spectacular.
Yeah.
Like,
And if
it's
you
just
look, yeah,
so
like you
impressive.
said, if you look at Taron Egerton, there's nothing there. And that's what's crazy too. No nominations for any of that stuff, which
No.
I'm just honestly genuinely surprised at. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
agree.
if you were looking through those movies and you were to say to me which one is the best one between Bohemian Rhapsody, this, and Elvis, it's not even close, in my opinion. I mean, Elvis, I guess I
Yeah.
gave Elvis and Rocketman the same amount of stars, but I'd revisit Rocketman a hell of a lot more than I would revisit Elvis. And I like both musicians' music. So it's not a
Mhm.
preference of, oh, I like Elton John more than Elvis. I like both. So that's not what it
Is
is.
it the
But
preference of you don't really like Baz Luhrmann?
no, I actually do like, but I like Moulin Rouge a lot,
Okay.
like
Okay.
quite a bit. I
Yeah.
like Moulin Rouge. And honestly, I kind of like the Romeo and Juliet he did.
I
I know that is a
I love
very
Romeo plus
polarizing
Juliet.
movie, and I
Great
cannot
movie.
imagine John liking that in any way, shape, or form.
What are you
But
talking about? It's got Radiohead throughout the entire movie. It's
so you
fantastic.
like it?
I love that movie.
Oh, see, I'm surprised. And then what else did Baz Luhrmann do? He did. I mean, The Great Gatsby, I thought was super
It was fun.
underrated.
Yeah,
So no, I
I
actually
agree.
do quite like Baz Luhrmann.
I
Actually,
think I do too. I actually quite enjoy Baz Luhrmann. I just know
yeah.
most people are really down on him.
Yeah. I mean, his stories, he goes for style over substance. And
Yes.
I think what makes Rocket Man work is that it managed to put the style in with the substance. I mean, when you're
Mhm.
watching the kid stuff at the beginning, it's like, all right, let me get my yawn out because this is boring. Don't care. But then it starts. I mean, the scene that really always hooks me with that movie is when he plays at the Troubadour. The
Yeah.
first time he plays at the Troubadour, when he's playing Crocodile Rock. And you know, because Taron Egerton does all of his own singing in this movie too, which is
Mhm.
absolutely incredible because he does sound very similar to Elton John at times. And Elton John is not an easy person to impersonate. You know, he can't hit the Crocodile Rock note. And so when they're about to hit that note, rather than having him try to do it, how they have him lift off and it's like this
Yeah.
surreal experience. That was when I said, okay, this movie's doing something different. And I really like the stylistic choices, the suicide scene with Rocket Man
Mhm.
and how it goes into they just dress him up and put him back out on stage. Go on, buddy. I really appreciated all that stuff. That's something that Bohemian Rhapsody absolutely did not have. And so, from a stylistic point of view, Rocket Man for me really hit a lot of that. And that was exciting for me. Like I was into that. And yeah, this is the movie. I mean, I'm not there is certainly the how have you not seen that movie
Yeah.
of the two because Rocket Man was much more popular. But I hope that people who missed Rocket Man find time to go watch Rocket Man because I do feel like it's worth a viewing, even if it's not the most groundbreaking movie of all time.
This was actually my first time watching this movie.
That kind of surprises me.
I surprises me too. I'm quite a fan of Elton John. I mean, I've seen Elton John live in like a 7,000 person arena in
Wow.
Victoria. Yeah. Somehow managed to get that off. Somehow, that opportunity arose, but like he's phenomenal. I spent Valentine's Day in 2011 by myself at an Elton John concert, uh, just because Elton John was playing.
Mhm.
And it actually surprised me when I watched this movie. I didn't realize it was a straight on musical.
It is, and it actually kind of goes not the Les Mis route because obviously Les Mis
No.
is every single line of dialogue is sung, but it does toe that line, right? Because in
Hmm.
Bohemian Rhapsody, they're only singing when they're on stage or when they're in the studio, and that's how we see a lot of these biopics. The
Yeah.
musician biopics, it's what is it, diegetic music?
Yeah.
This movie doesn't do that, and when it starts breaking the fourth wall to let you know it's going to do a musical number, I actually really appreciated that from this movie.
Yeah. Like, and the moment when this movie opens up, I mean, it opens up obviously with Elton John sitting in rehab in his like
Mhm.
crazy flamboyant costume that he has on. And then it goes, switches back to his childhood. And the first song of this movie is The Bitch is Back.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, didn't expect that to be how this kicked off, but it works. And the way that that's framed too, like how muted everyone there is, other than Reggie, in that scene where Reggie is very vibrant in comparison
Mhm.
to everyone else in all these muted colors. It's fantastic, and that's the point where I really bought into this movie because I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize this was going to be a musical," and then, "Oh, I didn't realize there was this much artistry in this musical."
Mhm. Yeah, it is really well designed. I mean, I think about the scene with Benny and the Jets. That's a
Hmm.
really, really impressive looking scene. The Tiny Dancer moment, because Tiny Dancer obviously has been used in so many movies. One of the most famous scenes of I would say probably one of the most famous musical scenes in a
Yes.
movie is the almost famous Tiny Dancer scene. I mean, that
Yeah.
was if you were to say 2000 cinema to me, I say, "Oh, there it is."
Yeah.
That
That one
encapsulates
scene.
it.
Yeah.
Those guys on the bus with her saying, with Kate Hudson saying, "You are home." Oh, yeah, that's it. So they had to figure out a different way to do it, and I think I appreciated the way they did it too. How it's exploring Elton John's sexuality and Bernie Taupin, and how Bernie Taupin isn't having to put himself out there. I mean, uh, as a huge classic rock fan, as a huge like blues of that era fan, I know about Bernie Taupin and Elton John. Like Elton John's name is on everything, but Bernie Taupin wrote everything. And
Yeah.
Bernie Taupin is brilliant and probably one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And the thing is, it's fun how this movie really does show how Bernie Taupin can just go and live his life and nothing's going to happen. And Elton John's the one who has to keep putting himself out there, out there, out there, out there. He has to be so much more concerned with everything. And I think it did, like with the Tiny Dancer scene, that's where it's showing that
Hmm.
longing and that loneliness and all of that. And the scenes that are broken down as musical scenes are very, very, very well done. And again, I already
Hmm.
said that this one, the Tiny Dancer one, obviously, but the Rocketman scene of this, I actually think is like perfection. It's so, so well done.
Which also, like, the interesting thing about both of those two scenes, with Tiny Dancer and Rocket Man, is I think both of them have very famous uses in media. Like you said, Tiny Dancer has the almost famous scene. Um, Rocket Man has the scene at the end of the third season of Californication,
Oh, okay.
which is like what I go for when I think Rocket Man now, is like that. That is one of the most impactful scenes in media to me, with the use of that song. And to see the way that it's done in this, the nice thing I found about the Tiny Dancer scene is it felt like, um, the director whose name I'm blanking on all of a sudden,
Dexter Fletcher.
Fletcher. It feels like Fletcher knew he was never going to have the best Tiny Dancer scene
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
cinema, right? Because that already exists. So he didn't even try for it, and instead gives us this real poignant, emotional scene where Elton's just like feeling alone and devastated. And then Rocketman's very similar when he's falling into the pool and you just see him drowning and
Mm-hmm.
getting sinking deeper and deeper. And to see like his younger self there,
Mm-hmm.
like welcoming him into the darkness, it's it's something else. It hits quite hard emotionally.
It does. It really, really does. And yeah, Rocket Man has a way of towing that line of it's not it's not using kid gloves to dive into his life because you can't get into Elton John's life and not get into addiction and all of that.
Mm,
Um, but it does have a way of staying bright and vibrant as all of this is
yes.
going on, which is very impressive. And I do think Elvis, Baz Luhrmann kind of does that in Elvis too. The thing is, though, in this movie, they just let Elton John be the main character. Elton John gets to narrate himself. He gets to break the fourth wall from time to time. You don't have to sit there and worry about whatever is
Tom
the
Hanks with a
colonel.
southern drawl.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about the colonel just jumping around doing that the entire time. So it's easy to just keep going. And to juxtapose that, and obviously, like we could go a half hour on this and a half hour, and I'm not there, but I think it's fun to jump over.
Yeah.
We see in I'm Not There them use the different ages of Bob Dylan throughout that entire movie too. But some of it is done hokey and some of it's done very dark.
Mhm.
And I think that is kind of an interesting way to look at it, where like tonally you could argue that I'm Not There is all over the place. I feel like Rocket Man really did a good job of balancing, even though I actually prefer I'm Not There. I think Rocket Man did a good job of balancing the darkness with the light and understanding what kind of movie they were making.
Rocketman goes for that linear approach, which makes it very easy. It has a very charismatic performer in Taron Egerton, and complements him with some very talented actors around him. I think that Jamie Bell is fantastic in this movie.
He's so good in this movie. Jamie Bell's a great actor, man.
He is. He is. And just like no one pays any attention to him, unfortunately. John Madden, also good in this movie.
Richard Madden.
Richard Madden.
John Madden, director of Shakespeare in Love and acclaimed football coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Richard Madden. Yep.
Richard Madden. Also like quite good and like comes off as this like terrible person the entire time.
Well, and what's funny is that's John Reed, right? So John Reed is who Aidan Gillen plays in Bohemian Rhapsody, because he's the manager of Queen too. And you see like Aidan Gillen, who I love Aidan Gillen. He has nothing to work with in Bohemian Rhapsody. It's absolute nonsense. And you actually get to see Richard Madden do it in a pretty impressive way. And I think what's most shocking is John Reed's still alive. And they lean in pretty bad to what a bad person he is with him being alive.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I think the single most impressive thing about Rocketman is the tonal shift that happens after Elton goes visit his dad.
Yeah.
That is the moment where this movie starts getting really depressing. And there's a change in the way it's shot, in the way that it's staged and just blocked. You see it in the way that the characters are interacting with each other. It's like this turning point of this is when I was like, oh, well, I'm never going to be a success anyways, because this man who always thought I was useless continues to think I'm useless.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, no matter what he does, it's just never, ever, ever, ever going to get better for him. It's just never going to get better. And you feel that. I mean, I think the movie does a pretty good job of handling that. So, what did you think about what story this movie decided to tell, where it decided to end? I guess you should say. It doesn't really tell you what years you're in or anything like that. You do kind of have to have a knowledge of his music in order to be able to keep up with it. What do you think about that?
I like it because I think this is the story that Elton John told about him. I would imagine, considering he would have to sign off on it.
He wrote music for it, like original song. So I would assume.
So it feels to me like this is the important aspect. I like that we don't get like this. Yes, we get him going to rehab and then like, the title card afterwards being like he's sober since then and everything like that. But we don't really get that happy ending in the movie. And I think I really like that. I like that we don't go into Elton John as he's been for the last 25 years instead, right?
Yeah, like it pretty much cuts off right around like the Lion King stuff, right? I think that's exactly right before the Lion King stuff starts coming out. And I think with the Lion King was really when he got clean and when everything started to kind of work out in his favor a little bit more. Or, at least he was just able to live like a healthier, happier life after that. But I kind of like that we didn't get into all of that because also one, you're not going to be able to get the rights to all the Disney music. That would have been a nightmare for them when making this movie. But I also think it did do a good job of telling the story and making it more like memoir. If anybody saw Priscilla this past year, the Sofia Coppola movie about Priscilla Presley, that movie is very much just about her time with Elvis. It's not about anything else beyond that. And so it doesn't get into anything else beyond that. It's just telling that story. So it is more of a memoir of I started and this is how I got my rise to music fame while also my life was just falling apart around me. And eventually I was able to figure out like how to be loved, and how to be the person that I want to be. I don't know. I feel like there was probably a little bit more they could have done with it in terms of the jumping around. I feel like there were moments where I was sitting there saying, is Bryce Dallas Howard going to age? And then the next time she aged so significantly that I was like, wait a second, how much time has passed now? Because now I'm confused. And for as much as they would show Elton losing his hair, they did start to have the wig elements and everything like that because Elton John started wearing a wig. So it was a little tough for me on that front of kind of figuring out where I was in the years of all of it, but it's still a really well done movie. And I wish more biopics would be like this. I don't need to watch Elton John very blandly go up on stage and sing a song. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I mean, Inside Llewyn Davis isn't about a real person, but we see Inside Llewyn Davis, there's a lot of just like sitting on a stage, singing a song, all of that. But when you're telling me this, I know Elton John songs. I know how he made them. Like, I understand all of that. So give me some of the spice. And when you watch Bohemian Rhapsody, which you'll have to do one day just for the laughs, there's no spice. There is absolutely no spice.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is this movie clearly had a message it was going to, and like this theme it was pushing outside of just this is the story of Elton John. It's very much focused on this idea of love and self-love and figuring out who you are and accepting who you are. And the way it's portrayed, even the way the film is framed as him explaining everything in rehab, it works really well. And then like when we see the people from his past come into the rehab clinic at the end, and it's like, okay, we're understanding like this emotional struggle he's going through. I love the fact that every time we check in on him in rehab, he has less and less of this costume on, as if he's getting rid of the persona of Elton John and getting back to who Elton John really is.
Yeah, slowly but surely he's peeling it all away to show his true self. So yeah. No, I really appreciated that too. I mean, that's good direction.
And it's so subtle. It's so few pieces of that costume coming off that when you get to the end and you realize he's just like sitting there in his underwear, you're like, wait a minute. When did this happen? And then you realize that it's been happening the entire film.
Yep. Exactly. Do you have anything else you want to say about Rocketman, or should we start talking a little bit more thoroughly about I'm Not There?
No, let's talk about Bob Dylan, because I had an experience this week where someone at work asked me who Bob Dylan was, and I was really concerned by that.
Dude, I was working a basketball tournament the one time, and I brought up the Doors because, the infamous thing of light my fire, couldn't get any higher. And they told him, you're not allowed to look into the camera and say, or you're not allowed to say get much higher. And then he comes out and he looks straight at the camera and he says, girl, you couldn't get much higher, as like an F you to everybody. I had said that to a group of people at a basketball game. Some are my age, 2-3 years younger, maybe a year or two older, whatever. No idea who the Doors were. No idea who the Doors were. And it blew my mind. So then I was watching Forrest Gump when we did Forrest Gump back in January or February or whatever it was for the Patreon. And I texted the one of the guys and I was like, you ever see Forrest Gump? He's like, yeah. I'm like, there's 4 Doors songs in that movie. 4 of them. So you not knowing who the Doors are is on you. And like, I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I know this person has a good relationship with their dad, so I can say this. It's like, sorry, your dad didn't play the Doors for you when you were a kid. It's like, come on. So yeah, to not know who Bob Dylan is. If you don't know who Bob Dylan is, he's the father of Jacob Dylan. That's what's most important to know about him.
Who's Jacob Dylan?
The lead singer of the Wallflowers. Come on, baby.
Okay, of course. Okay.
Of course, he's the lead singer of the Wallflowers, who totally got his career started not because of nepotism, but also wrote probably the greatest song of the 90s, if not ever, with One Headlight. One Headlight is absolutely incredible. So yeah, he wrote that, but that's, the Wallflowers have a couple good songs. I saw them live once. It was underwhelming. I love One Headlight though. I mean, that's a song I've listened to a million times, but yeah, I'm Not There. So, okay. First, I want to say when this movie was pitched back in 2007, it was Bob Dylan like you've never seen him before. Here's 6 people who are playing Bob Dylan. And then when you watch the movie, you realize they're not actually playing Bob Dylan. They're playing different named characters and stuff like that. And they're going through this. And it is a fictionalized thing based around the stories, lyrics, and life of Bob Dylan. Cate Blanchett is the most closely accurate to who Bob Dylan truly was. But to just sit there and say that this is like 6 different people playing Bob Dylan is just, it doesn't do justice to what this movie is. And if it wasn't for the Billy the Kid scenes, this was on its way to being probably the most underrated movie of the 2000s for me. This might have topped The Illusionist as, how have you not seen this movie? This is the hidden gem of the 2000s. I think it's still The Illusionist for now, but that's how I was getting ready to feel. And then I didn't like the Billy Kid stuff, but what did you think about this, and what did you know about this coming into this movie?
I knew that 6 people played Bob Dylan. I thought this was an actual biopic. I didn't realize it was this fictional telling. Sitting down and watching this, I was blown away, especially because the first instance you get of this is you get the kind of like interspersed cutting of what's his face, who plays Bob Dylan in the camera.
In the camera, Ben Whishaw.
Ben
Ben
Whishaw,
Whishaw.
yeah.
Yeah. The
And
one
you're
who's
like, okay,
literally just saying Bob Dylan quotes.
yeah, just saying Bob Dylan quotes the entire time. I'm like, okay. And then it switches to the kid. It switches to this like little black kid, and you're like, that's not Bob Dylan. But then you realize that it is Bob Dylan. And you realize then what the story is going to be and how this movie is portraying Bob Dylan. And because when I watched it, one of the major things that stuck out to me in the opening credits is based on the life and stories of Bob Dylan. There is so much respect for the artist in this one, and just like who Bob Dylan was as this figure within music and within history, really. Just like the influence this man had, and to have all of these different, like, this star-studded cast. This cast is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, even the people who don't play Bob Dylan. I mean, you have David Cross playing Allen Ginsberg, Charlotte Gainsborough, Bruce Greenwood, Julianne Moore, Michelle Williams. I mean, this cast is loaded.
Yeah. And then you have, Ben Whishaw, Kate Blanchett, Christian Bale playing Bob Dylan. I guess Heath Ledger. Is Heath Ledger the Bob Dylan in this instance, or is he not the Bob Dylan in this instance?
So Heath Ledger, from what I understand, because I did look up a little bit about this movie after I watched it, just to see like what they were getting at. Heath Ledger is playing essentially when Bob Dylan was in a movie or something like that. It was like, I forget exactly what it is. I have to look up exactly how that character is supposed to work, but it was pretty much something along the lines of the person who played the actor or played the character ended up becoming as famous as the person he was playing, is what that one's hinting at. But I'll look that up right now. Because it's fascinating. I mean, it's a really interesting, and this one it flies. It really, really, really flies off the page. So here it is. It's Robbie Clark's 22-year-old actor who plays Jack Rollins in the 1965 biographical film Grain of Sand. During filming in Greenwich Village, he falls in love with French artist Claire, and they soon marry. Blah, 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 blah. She is particularly... So this is... Let me see. It says... Oh, wait. Where is this? Because it says what it's supposed to be. Grain of Sand. The film within a film, Grain of Sand, is not only important to the plot of I'm Not There, but also for the film's connection to Bob Dylan's life. Larry Gross suggests that Grain of Sand actor Robbie may be the most accurate portrayal of Dylan, despite being a fictional actor playing a fictional alternative version of a real person. This is all coming from Wikipedia. But it is about his tumultuous relationship with Claire, which is very legitimate.
Right. And it's so interesting with it. Like, the way that relationship is framed with the end of Vietnam and everything like that, which obviously has this major impact on Dylan and his songwriting in general. And quite frankly, I think this was my favorite of the storylines. It was this Robbie Claire storyline. I felt like it was really fleshed out. I feel like Heath Ledger and this actress whose name I cannot remember, who plays Claire.
Couldn't tell you.
No, I've never seen her before other than this film, but I can find it here. It is
Charlotte Gaines. Oh, it is Charlotte Gainsborough.
Yeah,
Charlotte Gainsbourg. Sorry, Charlotte Gainsbourg. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Just like phenomenal in this, and this idea of like, you're not taking my kids away from me too, and things like that. But it's like, you're never here. It's so fascinating to see just this relationship between these people in the midst of this entire film. But I mean, now in 2024, we also understand that Todd Haynes just really likes focusing on relationships and the connections between people in his films.
Yeah, and I will say that out of all of the Todd Haynes films that I have seen, which is not all of them, but out of the ones I have seen, this is my favorite. And now I'm realizing I've only seen 3. I've seen I'm Not There, Carol, and Wonderstruck. And I did not really like Carol all that much. But I feel like with this movie, this is such a bold take. and such a hard thing to pull off. And not just to pull it off, but like to pull it off professionally. And the pace is so good. And the way it interlaces the music and the different characters and how it's easy to follow the entire time. You don't feel like you're just being left out in the dust to figure it out. Like you really do feel like it's there. This is why I love 2000s film. It was really when I feel like the indie movies were at their height. The 90s set the stage for what the 2000s were allowed to do. And in the 2000s, focus features and stuff like that, they were allowing these filmmakers to just go out there and really take chances. And as much as, the Weinsteins are a problem, the Weinstein company with the money they would put behind a lot of these movies, I mean, I'm Not There can't get made today because the indie scene has just died so significantly. There's such a lack of interest in that scene. And I mean, I'm Not There is such a movie of the era.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And even if you look at the fact that it's like non-linear storytelling, when we have 6 different stories going concurrently throughout the entire film, and it's just cutting between them. It's not like they're not interconnected. All they are these different personas of Bob Dylan, and they're portrayed in a way where you really get this. Despite the fact that this is all fictional, despite the fact that there, are so many different people, you still kind of get this understanding of who Bob Dylan is through watching this movie that you don't get through a lot of biopics.
Yeah. No, exactly. You might actually get a better understanding of him because you're getting so many different versions of his personality. You're not worrying about, is everything being accurately portrayed, because you understand that that's not the movie you're watching. And so it allows for them to, it allowed for the director to really dive in and say, okay, here's the different versions I want to talk about. And by doing that, you're actually getting to know this character better than most people in these. I mean, you get to know Bob Dylan better and I'm Not There than you get to know Elton John and Rocketman. Like, and in Rocketman, they do a really good job of telling the story of Elton John, but that's just how I feel.
And I think it's because there's this sense of, what do I want to say this? Like almost modesty to the way these characters are portrayed, where it feels very raw, the way that they're presenting. I mean, Kate Blanchett's phenomenal in this film.
Yeah, she is.
Kate Blanchett's almost always phenomenal, so it makes sense. The way she portrays this persona of Dylan, Jude, is just so, it's what you, like you said, it's what you expect Dylan to be, right? Like it's the stereotypical Dylan, but the entire time it's just so and again, it's the different styles used for each of these stories too, right? Like how the Jude story is all in black and white. It reels you in and you're excited every time one of these stories come out. Now, I get you might not have been excited every time the Billy the Kid story came around, but
I also feel like the problem with the Billy the Kid story was it was told the most at one time. Yes, it didn't feel like it was interspersed throughout the movie enough, and that's why I don't think I was as excited for it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like Richard Gere, I couldn't remember the last time I saw a Richard Gere movie before watching this. But he plays this character in an interesting way, and like I enjoy the Western aspect of it. It feels like a necessity to understanding Bob Dylan, but it's also weird that it's this character that we kind of know as well, right? Like in Billy the Kid.
And it's also, though, I think it's based on Dylan played, and I'm sorry, I'm looking it up. That's why I'm like, again, trying to remember, because I watched this right before I went on vacation. So it's actually been like 2 weeks almost now. In that he is playing, it has something to do with a movie that Bob Dylan was actually in, where he played somebody, but I have to figure out what that was. Because it is about Bob Dylan was in some movie and where he played like in a Western role. Bob Dylan, Western movie. Let's see. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. That's the name of the movie.
Yeah. Okay. So it is this character he played.
He's in like a very small role in the movie, but I guess I guess they decided to have him just, take on the persona of Billy the Kid.
but it's also like this old retired Billy the Kid, which is different than all these other personas of Dylan we're seeing in the movie, right? It's not like this seemingly innocent yet maybe criminal Woody, who is the child in this film. It's not the too much success Jude of the film. It's not the just coming into it Christian Bale character in the film. It's this old man who's just like, I just want to live my life. Like, you know, what's his what's that quote that he says? It's like you get yesterday, today, and tomorrow all in the same room. There's no telling what can happen, right? Like, it's that idea of just like living life and going for it. And I didn't mind the Billy the Kid segment of this. I don't know. I guess I kind of connected to it in some ways, where it's just like, you know, his dog runs away and then he goes into the town, and some of it's confusing. It's very hard to say I'm Not There is not a confusing film at times.
Yeah.
Like with like the Halloween in the town and stuff, and then the like the old state trooper comes in and everything, and it's just like, what is happening here?
You know what the biggest problem I had with Billy the Kid was? That part is like, it felt like it took the most explanation. Everything else just kind of unfolded the way that it had to unfold. And it felt like with the Billy the Kid part, they took more time to get into what the story was, why they felt the story was necessary, to dive in and give like the history of the town and everything, and how this character is going to overcome something and stand up to the man and whatever. But it just felt like it took the most explanation, and it felt like it had the least to do with his music and the least to do with who Dylan truly was. And I think that's what turned me off from it, especially since by that point in the movie, we're pretty much bouncing back and forth between Billy the Kid and Cate Blanchett. And at that point, I'm just invested in what the Cate Blanchett character is going through. Yeah. So I'd rather watch that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I totally understand that opinion of it. I guess I almost enjoyed the slower pace of the Billy the Kid section. It felt like a nice contrast to it. But I definitely understand these complaints of like how we don't get introduced to this character until like halfway through the movie. And at that point, you're like, oh my God, there's another one.
Yeah. Because you see Richard Gere very early on in the movie. They show all 6 versions of Dylan, but then that version really does vanish until the last half hour of the movie.
Yeah.
It really does.
But again, it like feels like a different movie, but it still fits into the same movie. That's the interesting thing about this movie, is that it's essentially 6 short stories, all shot in very different ways that fit together to make this cohesive story about a single man.
Yeah, and how did you feel about the use of music in this one? Because obviously with the other movie, Rocketman, they're doing a lot of, you know, the music, Taron Egerton singing it all, and it's a lot of remixes and different versions, alternate versions, whatever, of the songs. There's a lot of original music. This one really was more Dylan music, it felt like, throughout most of it. How did you feel about the use of music in this?
I like that it wasn't just like, I like that it wasn't diegetic music and wasn't just in the movie, and that it was just the soundtrack to the movie instead. I think it really works. A little confusing sometimes as to when certain songs are being used and how they apply to a situation without like knowing more about Dylan, but I liked it. I mean, I just kind of like Bob Dylan as an artist in general. So.
This is a movie where if you don't like Bob Dylan's music, I don't understand how you like this movie.
Yes, I agree. 100%. If you don't like Bob Dylan, this isn't the movie for you. If you kind of like Bob Dylan, or like, I know the odd Bob Dylan song, check this movie out.
Yeah, but even if you just kind of like him, it's like, it's so much Bob Dylan. I mean, the music just keeps playing, and it gets into, you know, the Ballad of the Thin Man. I thought that part is just so damn good. And like, I'm a huge fan of Bob Dylan's music. Like, I love Bob Dylan music. And so for me, I knew where a lot of the music was coming from. And then after the movie ended, I listened to Bob Dylan for like the next like 12 hours and all of that stuff. But it is just funny how, if you're not into it, they lean in so hard that it's like, I hope you like Bob Dylan. I mean, but then again, why are you going to go see a movie called I'm Not There about Bob Dylan if you don't like Bob Dylan? Although with a $20 million budget, there has to be some hope that somebody who's not a Bob Dylan fan is going to sit down and watch this movie.
Yeah, but like, even if I remember the promotional materials correctly for this movie, they really leaned into the fact this was a Bob Dylan movie.
Yeah, they did.
Right? And like it's I don't know. I think it's one of those things where 2007 is also just a year where everyone's going to the cinema because there are tons of fantastic movies coming out that year.
Yeah, and it definitely did get lost in the mix for sure. It premiered November 21st, 2007 in the United States, and I think it just got lost in the mix of a really, really crowded Oscar season. There will
And
be
that's an
blood,
Oscar release time
and
frame too, right?
atonement.
Like
What was that?
that's an Oscar release time frame too. End of
That's what
November.
I'm saying. It was a really crowded Oscar season, and it just got lost in the mix. And it's such a weird movie. It doesn't have your typical narrative that pretty much every other movie from 2007 had. I mean, you have to think like the 2007 Oscar nominees: Michael Clayton, kind of weird, but like not super weird. Juno, Atonement, No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood. You can follow all those other movies a lot simpler. And if you're going to go watch a Western, which this movie is labeled as a music/Western,
Yeah.
if you're going to go watch a Western, you're going to go watch There Will Be Blood or No Country for Old Men. It's almost like this just came out the absolute wrong year for the type of movie that it was trying to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just that like this year already had two of the best modern Western films ever made, and makes it a little hard to do. I will say this movie's definitely better than Michael Clayton because I watched that recently, and that movie is questionable as to how that got a Best Picture nomination.
That's funny. I haven't seen Michael Clayton in so long. Like since probably 2007, maybe 2008. I have not seen it in such a long time. So that's one that I definitely need to rewatch. I've seen it once, but I haven't seen it more than that. And I need to sit down and I need to give it a thorough rewatch because that's probably my biggest blind spot of the 2000s Oscar nominated Best Picture nominated movies is probably Michael Clayton, even though I've seen it.
Yeah, it's a very convoluted movie in my opinion. But alas, I think this would have been a much better Oscar. Sorry?
Clones does a good job in this one, but the plot is incredibly convoluted and hard to follow. Who's Clones?
It's Clooney. It's supposed to say Clooney.
Well, John, it doesn't say Clooney. It says Clones.
Well, my apologies. My letterbox has fallen victim of my phone's spell check.
Sure it has. Sure it has.
I promise.
Very funny with Tony Gilroy, though. He literally did Michael Clayton, Duplicity, and The Bourne Legacy, and that's all he's done.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
But I'm not there just... I wish we had more movies like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like... Because it's an anthology film, really, is the best way to look at it. And I guess that was kind of the time period where we had a lot of anthology films starting to come out in that like late aughts, early 10s. So it feels like maybe it was just over, like the style was overdone. But I think we need stuff like this again. I guess it's kind of, honestly, I guess it's kind of similar to like something like Crash, isn't it?
This is similar to Crash, but Crash is definitely a story that all comes together in the end.
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody connects in a much more coherent, easy to follow for a general audience way. Whereas this one is, everybody is connected because they're all Bob Dylan or versions of Bob Dylan. Yeah. But Crash is literally like, hey, John went to the grocery store today and the grocery store clerk ended up being the guy that drove into my wife on the way. It's like, it's ridiculous, right? Like, not that it's, I mean, I love Crash, but it's just, that has so much more of that going on. I think the thing really to get with this type of movie with I'm Not There is you see now a lot of these just general biopics. Let's not even say it musician based, right? Yep. Let's talk about Selma. Let's talk about, God, why is Selma the only one that's coming to mind? What's the biopic that came out like literally last year? There has to be one, right? That was
Priscilla. You literally mentioned one earlier.
I did. Priscilla, right? All of these movies follow such a straightforward telling of the events. And I know that like Selma was pretty popular when it came out. I think it was more popular with the media than it was with audiences. Ava DuVernay does a great job with the movie, and David Oyelowo is great as Martin Luther King Jr. But when you watch the movie, you come out of that and it's like, okay, what did I learn about Martin Luther King Jr. that I didn't already know? What else? What did I get from this movie that was different? And, I know a lot of people, well, it's an important movie. Okay, there's a lot of important movies, but there's a lot of important movies that also know how to be more entertaining than that, right?
Yeah.
And I think like when you start to look at how people make biopics, there became this style, this theory almost of must do justice to the person we're making the movie about. Okay, but like Braveheart is technically about a real person, but it's a super entertaining action epic.
Mhm.
Ben-Hur. I mean, I know now you watch
Yeah.
Ben-Hur, it's dated for sure, but it's a huge
No, the movie's
action
still
epic.
phenomenal.
Yeah, like it's absolutely incredible. And so for some reason we just got into, well, we have to put realism over everything else. And I think
Mhm.
when you put realism over everything else, I can go read about the Wikipedia page for everything that happened in the movie you're showing me, and I don't care that this person looks like that person or that John Lewis is in the movie. You know what I mean? Like those are cool
Yeah.
elements, but what else is separating this movie for me? And now I'm sitting here ripping on Selma, and that's not what the point of this whole thing is. It's just the only one that is coming to mind off the top of my head. So now that's where I'm stuck. But like, okay, Maestro, right? I
Yeah.
actually quite enjoyed Maestro.
Yeah.
It tried to do a little bit different with it, but at the end of the day, it really is just telling the story. Oppenheimer is a montage. It got
Mhm.
exciting. Like I can't think of biopics. Last year was literally just biopic.
Yes.
Um, like I couldn't like that movie was telling it in such a fun way. And then you have something like The Darkest Hour. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? It's a snooze.
I think you're really just hitting on the fact that, and what makes these two movies that we're discussing this week so why it feels like they stand out in comparison to other biopics. Filmmaking should be fun. Movies should be fun. And you can have movies about super depressing topics because both of these movies pretty depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still fun, right? Like, and that's the big thing. I'm thinking about like I when we look at the movies, like the new release movies we talked about this time, how many times in the last year we're like, why is there no fun in this movie? Why
Yeah.
is this movie not entertaining? It's because there's a lack of fun. I look at something like I watched probably one of the most depressing movies I've ever watched this week in Leaving Las Vegas.
So
There's
brutal, man.
so brutal, so depressing. Still fun and enjoyable, and you can see the fun in the filmmaking, despite
Mm-hmm.
the fact that man, you feel empty after watching that movie.
I can't watch that movie because it makes me so depressed. He's
Yes,
drowning in the entire movie. You're watching
yes,
him drown for 2 hours.
yeah. It's brutal.
Mhm.
It's very brutal,
Nick Cage
and
earned that Oscar.
he sure did.
Mhm.
And that's what I think I'm Not There and Rocketman does, is it embraces the fun of the medium of film, right? It's not doing this standard paint by numbers that we've gotten so used to in this streaming era where they can pump out 12 dozen movies every month. And
Yeah.
instead, like it's focusing on like how do we tell this story in an exciting and different way? What do we do to make our movie different? I'm Not There does it by completely throwing out any of the conventions of filmmaking and storytelling.
Mhm. And what's crazy about it is like every time one of these movies comes out, another musical biopic or just like a biopic in general, if it doesn't have a massive name director attached to it, like
Mhm.
Christopher Nolan, like with
Yeah,
Oppenheimer, you know what you're getting every time.
yeah,
You really do know what you're getting. And I think that, Dexter Fletcher is not a household name. I couldn't tell
yeah.
you another movie he directed. I'm sure I could look it up. I'm sure he has directed something else, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else he ever directed. Todd Haynes directed Carol. That came out years ago now. I mean, that's
Yeah.
old at this point. Far From Heaven was 2002. And so
I mean, he had Todd Haynes had a little bit of success this year with May December.
that's true. He did do May, December. That's a good point. So it's like, but again, that's just coming to the point of like, these were these were movies that they were willing to take the chance. And now if one of these, you see a trailer for Bob Marley One Love, I know what that movie's going to be. Maybe I would like it because I like Bob Marley's
Purdue.
music, but that's, I want to watch it.
Yeah,
Back to Black. Yeah. That Amy Winehouse album is incredible. Go watch
mhm.
the Amy documentary. It's brutal and it's
Probably
brilliant.
better. Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't need to watch this movie of what, like, it's not necessary. And these movies are going to start losing money like crazy because honestly, like, there's just not that much excitement around it, especially when they're all just the same.
Back to Black making $3 million in a movie in a weekend when no other movie was released is wild.
Oh, it's bad.
And granted, we had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes earlier in the month, which was, I mean, probably still took away. I know a lot of people who have been going.
I mean, I think The Strangers Chapter 1.
Yeah,
was the movie.
that's true.
Yeah.
Though I heard that was a pretty bad movie too. And like, I think people are preparing to go to the movies next week with Furiosa. So yeah. I understand it, but at the same time, it's like movies should be making more than $3 million on the weekend they're released.
Especially when it's about somebody named Amy Winehouse. If you can't get people in the theaters off of huge international pop stars, you did something wrong.
Apple Music just counted down their top 100 albums of all time, and as contentious as that list can be, they have Back to Black in the top 10 albums of all time. And this movie made no money.
Made nothing. Made absolutely nothing. Yeah, it's crazy, man. It really is. It's really, really crazy. What the heck? But anyway, you have anything else you want to talk about with I'm Not There now that we've gotten off track and we're starting to talk about everything else?
If you haven't watched this movie and you enjoy Bob Dylan, give it a watch because it's a really fun movie to watch.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm bummed that it took me so long to watch it. But anyway, so that's going to do it. Next week, which really is in 3 days, which I don't know if I'm going to want to do Memorial Day, John. We might be doing Tuesday. Okay. I don't know. I have to figure it out. I have to figure out what I feel like doing on Monday. Maybe I'll do it. But are you off on Monday or no?
No, our holiday was this last Monday.
Damn. Okay. We'll have to figure out what's going to happen. Either Monday or Tuesday, we'll be back. And we're going to be talking about aliens. And what's our second movie?
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow. Okay, that'll be fun because we're doing this for Furiosa coming out. So we're going to talk about those two movies. Become a patron, patreon.com/The Specialist. We released This Is Spinal Tap last week. Chungking Express coming up. And then we're doing Rocky 2 to start off June. So get excited for that. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you're enjoying the series. Hope you're enjoying this episodes. And we'll be back either Monday or Tuesday night. Follow us over on social media so that you can find out when. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you later.